this week we are at the book of Esther. And the book of Esther, the theme of Esther is preservation. And so I'm going to take a little bit different view of this today, but I want to talk about how we sow seeds of preservation. Esther's one of the few books named after a woman in Scripture, and for today I'm going to just hijack that and talk about a man in the story. But I think sometimes we miss the importance of Mordecai in the story. You know, there's this old saying, and some people are offended by it because they say it's sexist, and if you take it that way, I'm going to prepent. If you don't know what prepenting is, it means you apologize, but you're going to do it anyway, so I'm prepenting. There's this old saying that says, behind every good man is a good woman. Well, the opposite of that is also true. Behind every good woman is a good man, all right? And if any of you think you're good, I don't need a man or I don't need a woman, you're full of baloney. And because here's the thing, behind every good person are good people. That's just the bottom line. There's nobody that has ever achieved anything or been good at something or arrived at this place of significance on their own. They didn't just say, okay, I'm going to be good myself and forget everybody else. No, it required other people in their circle helping them, assisting them, helping to shape them into the person that they are today. And so the truth is, like, I'm the beneficiary of a lot of good people. People who came before me in this church. I'm a beneficiary of good parents and good grandparents. Like, there are a lot of people who came before me that have helped shape me into the person that I am today. So today we're going to look at Mordecai, and Mordecai is kind of a key to this story. It is like, I think sometimes we don't even realize the significance he plays in this story. So let me give you a little bit of history. Mordecai's family had been exiled to Babylon when King Nebuchadnezzar had exiled the Israelites. So he took them and he moved them to Babylon. He was one of the families. Esther, whose name was Hadassah, but it says also known as Esther. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Like, this is her name, but she's also known as Esther. Her parents die. They are cousins. So Mordecai is Esther's cousin. That's how they're related. But he most likely is significantly older than she is. We don't have an exact time, but most likely he's significantly older than she is. And it says that both of her parents died, and he took her in and adopted her, and brought her into his family and treated her like his daughter. And when the king was looking for a new wife, Mordecai talks to Esther, and he gives her some instructions. He tells her not to tell who she is and where she comes from, and not to let anyone know that she's a Jew. Now, if you're wondering how long did it take for him to choose a queen, I'll give you a basic kind of timeline. It says that when Vashti was exiled out of the kingdom, it was the 3rd year of his reign. It says that when Esther came into the palace, it was the 7th year of his reign. So there were 4 years between the exile of the previous queen and the insertion of Esther as the queen later. So there's 4 years. And in that period of time, Mordecai takes a position in the palace. So he's one of the guards at the gate, or one of the gatekeepers, if you will. That becomes his job. And so even, it says this, after she became queen, it says, even after all the young women had been transferred to the second harem, and Mordecai had become a palace official. So, like, what happens is they get moved from this group, all right, so you survived, and you get moved to this group, so you've moved up a little bit. It says that Esther continued to keep her family background and nationality a secret. She was still following Mordecai's directions, just as she did when she lived in his home. That's Esther chapter 2, verses 19 and 20. So Mordecai has significant influence over Esther. He's kind of guided her through this process every day as she's going through the process to become queen. He's coming and asking questions, how's she doing? Is she going to make the cut? Does the king like her? Is she listening to what you said? He's having significant influence on her. And he's going to be the one in the end of the story, okay, that pushes Esther to confront the king. Esther doesn't want to do it. All right, Esther is pushing back. As a matter of fact, she says, I can't do that. But it's Mordecai that says, yes, you can. As a matter of fact, if you think you're going to be exempt from this annihilation, you're mistaken. They're going to kill you as well once they find out who you are. And so today I want to talk a little bit about Mordecai. I've never preached a sermon on just about Mordecai. And so today I want to talk about Mordecai, and I want to talk about how we plant seeds of preparation. What you are reaping today, whatever your harvest is today, good or bad, big or small, is a result of seeds that you planted sometime before. You didn't plant them yesterday. You didn't plant them 10 days ago, most likely. Most likely they were seeds that were planted months, maybe even years before. And today you're reaping a harvest of it. Some of you are maybe retired. And the reason why you're able to be retired and not have to continue to work a full-time job is because sometime previously you planted some seeds that are bringing forth fruit today that are allowing you to do that right at this moment. Some of you may be struggling with your health, or you may be in good health, one of the two. And it's not because yesterday, right, you ate bad, or yesterday you decided you were going to get healthy. It's because sometime before, usually years before, you didn't take care of yourself, or you decided that you were going to take care of yourself. The same is true of everything else. See, your current harvest comes from past sowing. And often we don't think of it in terms of that. We don't realize the impact that today is going to have on us next year or 10 years from now. And this is an important concept for us to get, because if we don't get this concept, we'll miss the fact that we reap things. Now, listen, because the law of sowing and reaping is it's throughout the entire Scripture. And sometimes God's grace keeps us from reaping everything we would have reaped because we sowed some bad seeds. Right? And other times we get a better harvest than what we actually sowed because of God's grace. But most of the time in our life, we do this and the outcome is this. And so we have to understand how this works in our life. The years ahead, your years ahead, are going to be impacted by your choices that you make today. There are things that I deal with today because of choices, decisions that I made 10, 20, 30 years ago. But they're present today because I made certain choices and I have to deal with that. So Mordecai planted some seeds both with Esther and with the king that are going to play dividends down the road. And I think that there are some things we can learn from Mordecai's story. So Mordecai particularly plays an important role in chapter 2 and then later in chapter 6. And that's where we're going to look at today. Here's the first thing I want to talk to you about. Be concerned about others. Selfish people rarely reap a harvest, or at least they rarely reap a harvest that benefits anybody but themselves, because selfish people view life as scarce. And they think there can't be but so much to go around. And so I don't want to sow too much because they'll benefit and I won't reap the benefit. They think of everything in terms of how does this affect me? And even if they are sowers, even if they are planting good seeds, they're thinking, how is this going to return to me, right? Who's going to notice me for doing this good deed? Who's going to pat me on the back for doing the right thing? Who's going to give me a standing ovation? Is this going to get me the promotion that I want? Is this going to get the person to pay attention to me that I was hoping would pay attention to me? And here's one of the things that I would tell you, though, that needs to be a part of your life is you have to show some concern for others, because seeds of concern for other people will come back in a harvest of care and preservation later. It says, one day as Mordecai was on duty at the king's gate, this is the text I read at the beginning, two of the king's eunuchs, Bigthana and Teresh, these guys had to be in the WWE. I mean, if Bigthana is not a wrestling name. Right? Like when I read this, I could just hear music and fireworks and somebody busting out, just ready to go, grabbing a mic and telling us what they were going to do at WrestleMania. I know too much about wrestling, don't I? It says, who were guards at the door of the king's private quarters, became angry at King Xerxes and plotted to assassinate him. These are the people who are very, very close to the king. If you haven't figured this out in life, the people who have the ability to hurt you the most are the people who are closest to you. It's not somebody like you don't know their name, or, they're just an acquaintance, or you just walk by them occasionally. It's the people who are closest to you that have the most ability to bring harm to your life. It says, but Mordecai heard about the plot and gave the information to Queen Esther. She then told the king about it and gave Mordecai credit for the report. Now, I want you to notice a couple of things here. I think we skip this tidbit right here when we get to the end of the story. All right? When we get to the end about Esther approaching the king and bringing him information that he's going to believe, we miss this piece. You understand how people build credibility? When you tell them things that are credible and they learn to trust you and you build credibility with them, then when you come with other information, they go, oh, okay, you're probably telling me the truth. Here, Mordecai is concerned about the king. He realizes there's a plot against him. Nobody's told him. And so he has constant communication clearly with Esther, and he tells Esther what's going to happen. Esther then tells the king, and Mordecai gets credit for it. It says, when an investigation was made and Mordecai's story was found to be true, the two men were impaled on a sharpened pole. This was all recorded in the book of the history of King Xerxes' reign. There's a couple of things I want to talk about just briefly right here. One, this instance, in my opinion, sets up Esther to be able to walk in another time and say, hey, something bad is happening, and the king believes her. You see, that's how credibility is built. You plant seeds where people say, okay, that came to pass. Oh, that came to pass. Oh, that came to pass. And you begin to believe, okay, this person has a track record of things coming to pass. I can believe what they say. And so that's what happens in this story. Esther brings the information to the king. It is found out to be true. It is interesting here. It says that the two men are impaled on a sharpened pole. Apparently, this was the way that they like to kill people, because it happens multiple times in the short book of Esther. And we live in a really sanitized world. Okay, we do. We live in a very, very sanitized world. And there's a lot of debate about whether kids should, play video games where there's murder and all of those things and how it affects their brain. I just want you to think about this. Well, how would it be, to get in your car on the way to school and you pass by the courthouse and there's two dudes impaled on poles outside and you got to explain to them what happened? Right? That's how sanitized the world we live in, because they just executed people. Can that is pretty gruesome. Right? They didn't just wiggle them down on the pole, I'm sure they got these sharp poles and skewers. Y'all shouldn't be laughing. Sometimes I'll laugh at stuff I'm not supposed to laugh at. My wife's like, why are you laughing? It ain't funny. I'm like, well, right this minute it kind of is. But they impaled. You're going to find later Haman. There's a sharpened pole that's created for Mordecai that Haman gets impaled on. Like, this was the way that they killed people. But it was Mordecai's concern for the king that caused him later, and that's important too, later to reap a reward. That's the second piece of this. Is you have to trust God's timing. We are conditioned in this world for immediate gratification. There are so many studies like where they put kids in a room and they say, I'm going to leave the room for 3 minutes. You can eat the cookie. But if you wait until I come back 3 minutes later, you can have 2 cookies. And something like 90% of the kids eat the cookie, right? Because we want that immediate gratification. That's not new, okay? Like we think that's just since the microwave and the smartphone. Some of these studies go back 100 plus years, and the kids were the same way when they were having to read by candlelight, right? It's just immediate gratification. We want immediate gratification. And when we do something, like we expect there to be this reward for it. When we help somebody, we expect there to be, this parade in town and everybody standing on the side of the road and giving us a hand because we did some good deed, or, we help serve in some capacity, and, we want somebody to pat us on the back and tell us what a great job we did. And listen, I believe that's necessary. I understand. But what I want to tell you is you do not want your own reward. What I mean by that is you don't want to say, okay, I'm going to do this good deed, and you get to decide how it's rewarded. What you want is God's reward in God's timing. And when God gives you the reward in his timing, it's going to be way better than anything you would have ever gotten. What you might get if you get it your way is a nice gift or a pat on the back or some applause. But if you do it in God's timing, if you allow God to handle the recognition that it is that you so desire, I think it will change. And so what you have to understand is this took place. He saved his life, and then a period of time passes. If you want to know how long, okay, to kind of help you out, in chapter 3, verse 7, so we read at the end of chapter 2, end of chapter 2, we're in the 7th year of his reign. In chapter 3, we're in the 12th year of his reign. We're getting ready to read in chapter 6. So there's at least 5 years that have passed since he saved the king's life and got no reward for it. And it says that night the king had trouble sleeping, so he ordered an attendant to bring the book of history of his reign so it could be read to him. I don't know if this is arrogant or if this is just the way he goes to sleep. Like, I'm pretty sure if you come read me history, I would go to sleep. I mean, how great would it be to have somebody read to you? Right? Like, I can't sleep. Let me lay my head back and you come read to me. Now, I know that sounds kind of weird. Like I have one of those weird traits. If you ever see me in my car with a banana split and my wife's feeding me, I've had a bad day. She says, you're weird. If I'm stressed, we'll go to Dairy Queen, I'll get a banana split. I'm like, here, I'm driving, you can feed me. And this, some of y'all think I'm weird now too. But like he's laying there, I can't sleep. Let me get somebody to read to me. It says, in those records, he discovered an account of how Mordecai had exposed the plot of Bigthana and Teresh, the tag team champions, 2 of the eunuchs who guarded the door of the king's private quarters. They had plotted to assassinate King Xerxes. What reward or recognition did we ever give Mordecai for this? The king asked. His attendants replied, nothing has been done for him. Who is that in the outer court? The king inquired. As it happened, Haman, all right, to give you a little bit of history here, Mordecai will not bow to Haman. Haman's got this decree that says everybody's got to bow to me. He's the one that takes the place, by the way, of the 2 men that have been executed. And he's wanting everybody to bow to him. Mordecai will not bow. He's coming in to have him killed. All right, he's setting him up to have him killed. On the other side, God's working. All right, at the same time, he's plotting against God's people. God's working for his people. It says it happened, Haman had just arrived in the outer court of the palace to ask the king to impale Mordecai on the pole. See, it's a common thing, apparently, that he had prepared. So the attendants replied to the king, Haman is in the outer court. Bring him in, the king ordered. There's a couple of things I want to say here. First of all, sometimes people forget things. And I think we should be better at showing people grace who don't give us the recognition that we think we deserve, because sometimes they just forgot. Right? That's clearly what happened here. I don't know how you forget this, okay? Apparently life is so busy you forgot somebody saved your life, but he clearly had forgotten. And it wasn't that he didn't want to order him or honor him. It was just he forgot to honor him. The other thing I would say is that it was really just God's timing. Notice how the night before Haman is coming to ask for Mordecai to be impaled on a pole, he can't sleep, and he brings somebody in to read to him, and they just happen to read the story about the man, right, who had saved his life. And sometimes we get all in arms because God hasn't done what we thought needed to be done. And what we sometimes have to do is wait on his timing. If you're looking at this story, what looks like his demise is getting ready to be his promotion. And sometimes in our life, what looks like is something that's going to take us down is the very thing that God uses to set us up for the next thing that God wants to do in our lives. There are times in our life where the enemy has his sights set on us, and we're like, why isn't God looking out for me? And what we should be doing is saying, God, whatever it is in your timing, I believe you're going to work it out. And for whatever reason, God waited until the night before, minutes before, his second in command comes in to ask for this man to be impaled on a pole. And at that moment, God intervened. I just want to encourage some of you today who think the situation has gone too far and life has passed you by too much and it's too desperate and God can't work. God is still able to work in your situation, and what you want is God's timing, not the reward that you think it is that you want. You see, there's all of these scriptures, that when I read things like this, that I'm reminded of what the enemy meant for evil, God turned for good. Like in all of this moment, all of these things are going on. A history lesson is taught in the middle of the night because a king couldn't sleep. And standing outside is the man who's wanting to kill the man that he's reading about. And he invites the man in. And that's the last part of this story, is sometimes you have to allow your enemies to elevate you. Boy, this is hard, right? This is a difficult piece because we want to get rid of all the people that don't like us. I know pastors who think this way. They're like, man, if we could just, if just these people that didn't like what we were doing, if they would just leave. I just got a secret for you. If they left, there would be some folks that do like it that would stop liking it, because there's always got to be somebody that don't like it. Right? Always. Sometimes you just have to let them be the ones that elevates you to the place you need to be. It says, so Haman came in. Imagine, I want y'all to get this picture. This is like the king's bedroom. Okay? He's probably not sleeping on the throne. Okay? This is his bedroom. This is an intimate place. And he's invited Haman in. And I can imagine, I've never been here. The king has invited me to his bedroom. He must have something important he wants to. Can you imagine the Ric Flair strut? I'm talking too much about wrestling today. That came, when he came walking into that room, that day, I can see the look on his face like he thought, man, this is going better than I ever thought. I thought I was going to have to wait until he had some free time. But now he's inviting me in the middle of the night. Yeah, thank you. Says, so Haman came in, and the king said, what should I do to honor a man who truly pleases me? Haman thought to himself, whom would the king wish to honor more than me? That's the thing about arrogant people. They don't think there's anybody else to honor but themselves. It says, so he replied, If the king wishes to honor someone, he should bring out one of the king's own royal robes, as well as a horse that the king himself has ridden, one with a royal emblem on its head. Let the robes and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials, and let him see that the man whom the king wishes to honor is dressed in the king's robes and led through the city square on the king's horse. Have the officials shout as they go, "This is what the king does for someone he wishes to honor." Like, this is so awesome, right? Because he thinks he's the one going to be on the horse. Right? He thinks this is me, like all the things I've ever dreamed of, I'm getting ready to do. Like this, there are some moments of the Bible that I want to see. Like, I want to see him play. This is one. Like, because he's going to go from way up here to, right now, you can hear the big old sucking sound. You know, getting ready to suck the life right out of it. "Excellent," the king said to Haman. "Quick, take the robes and my horse and do just as you have said for Mordecai the Jew." He could have been anybody any more of an enemy, he felt, than him. Like, if the king could not have named anybody worse in Haman's expectation than Mordecai the Jew. And he says, "Who sits at the gate of the palace, leave out nothing you have suggested." So Haman took the robes and put them on Mordecai, placed him on the king's own horse, and led him through the city square. Like, ain't this good? Right? Like this right here is so good. The person who is trying to kill him now's got him on a horse going, "This is what the king does." He was hating every minute of it. I think he was saying it like, "This is what the king does." For someone he wishes to honor. This next line tells me everything I need to know about Mordecai. Afterward, Mordecai returned to the palace gate. They've had a parade for him. Everybody's clapped for him. He's been honored by the king. But when he was done, he went back and did his job. It didn't swell his head. He didn't say, "Well, I deserve more." He just went back and got to work. It tells me everything I need to know about the man that he was. He was like, "Yep, you can honor me, but I got a job to do. Let me down and let me do my job." It says, "But Haman hurried home, dejected and completely humiliated." When Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends what had happened, his wise advisors and his wife said, "Since Mordecai, this man who has humiliated you, is of Jewish birth, you will never succeed in your plans against him. It will be fatal to continue opposing him." His wife and his advisors tell him, like, "You're going to die." While they were still talking, the king's eunuchs arrived and quickly took Haman to the best banquet Esther had prepared. There's a couple of things I want to deal with right here that are a little bit tricky. God used Haman, and he did not even know he was being used. God is using people right now that you believe are solely controlled by the devil. They're planning evil, they're plotting evil, they may even be carrying out evil. But God's plan and God's purposes are greater than any evil that could ever be carried out. And you think if we could get rid of this evil person, we would solve all of our problems. But what you may not realize is God's using what you think is an evil person to bring about his good plan. I would say it like this: your sinfulness does not limit God's effectiveness. You think because they're evil or they're sinful that God can't use them in his purpose and his plan. What I'm telling you is that God is ultimately sovereign and he is in control, and he can use who he wants, how he wants, to bring about what he wants. And what you have to do is be patient and allow him to use even evil people to bring about his goodwill. The whole time, God is using Haman to bring about the good that he wants to bring about for Mordecai. He allowed him to be the one that blessed the man that God wanted to bless. You see, Mordecai's preservation, and in my opinion, the Jewish people's preservation in this story, were planted long before there was a fasting and praying and Esther entering into the king's room to say, hey, I need to have a banquet. Haman is trying to kill all of us. Long before that, it was Mordecai who was shaping her and telling her how to adjust, and then giving her information that allowed her to go to the king and build credibility. You see, there are things right now that you're benefiting from that you've long forgotten the good things you did that brought it to pass. The good seeds that you planet that brought today to happen, the things that are happening in your life. You may have even forgotten the bad things that are creeping up on you and causing you the headaches that they're causing you today. And listen, there's so many things that this is like, but this whole concept of preservation, seeds were planted long before he needed them, that come to fruition when he needed them at that particular moment. What we have to do is practice planting seeds of preservation, and one of the ways we do that is by thinking about others.